Recording in progress.
Okay, I will call the meeting to order.
All right. Chair Roman,
Present?
Vice Chair Willis,
Present.
Board Member Ulinskis,
Present.
Board Member Eagleson-Cheswich,
Present.
Board Member Pease.
Present.
For the record, we have quorum, and also noting that Councilmember George Liu is here also.
Great. Are there any changes to today's agenda?
No changes planned for today.
Are there any public comment cards that have been submitted?
Through the chair, I've received no public comment cards, and there are currently no raised hands on Zoom.
Thank you. Then we can move to, let's see, the schedule of meetings and assignments.
Good morning. Let me share my screen here. All right, well, welcome to our November meeting. We have one left on the books for 2025. So as detailed in the packet, that following meeting in December would be on the 11th. So depending on today's discussion of the action item, perhaps we may have an item. There is a pending project that I don't believe will be ready for that December meeting. So that would probably be postponed to January in 2026. So I did want to provide a brief update on an item that's going to City Council consent calendar. So that is on December 1st. So that was the 1680 Bryant Street category downgrade that the Historic Resources Board had reviewed and made a recommendation. So I just wanted to provide that for the record here. And once that staff report is made available and distributed, I will be providing that to the board. And with that, I can take any questions.
So I see it's on the consent calendar. So how does that figure in with our ruling that it shouldn't change category?
Exactly. So typically the process for an upgrade, I think this is an interesting one, requesting a downgrade. So it would be the first in quite some time. Those are put before the Historic Resources Board. Recommendation is made, and the next step would be going to council as a consent calendar. Of course, if the 3 council members have a desire to pull an item from a consent, it can be brought as an action item, but it would need to have the 3 council members' support in order to do so. So just following the standard process for these classifications. And it is worth noting, the recommendation from the Historic Resources Board was to maintain the current category. Unfortunately, based on the professional opinion of the city's retained historic preservation consultant, we are moving forward with the applicant's request. So it is in odds, if you will, with the board's recommendation, but that's kind of where that landed in the discussion. And the staff report details the justification and reasoning behind that.
Are there any public comments for this section of the agenda?
Through the chair, I received no public comment cards, and there's no raised hands on Zoom.
Great. Then are there any other questions or comments on this agenda item on the calendar? All right, we'll move forward to the staff report.
All right, well, hello again. Here we are with another discussion with the Historic Resources Board Award Program and potentially amending the amendments, the bylaws here for the board to establish the program formally. So just briefly to kind of outline The discussion is the action item to amend the bylaws with the draft language provided in attachment B, and discuss the evaluation criteria and process of the reduced project list and what a potential award program would look like for the city of Palo Alto. So timing and frequency, just a little recap of some previous discussions. There was a consensus to have a 5-year cycle, as well as having the awards land in the month of May, which is the National Preservation Month, and having that start in 2026 with the cohort for the 2025 awards. As for the draft language, as detailed in attachment B and highlighted on the screen, it is adding 3 sections, one discussing kind of the overarching desire of the preservation awards, as well as the criteria and number of the awards, which would be limited to the awarding board at the time to allow that flexibility for future boards to kind of decide what would better reflect the preservation award program during their tenure. And brief section about how the awards would be presented, whether it be in City Hall or in some other location. And this aligns with the Architecture Review Board, their award program, and similar language added to their bylaws. So, as for evaluation criteria, the initial project list, I believe, was 54, detailed in the staff report. That was expanded to include some building permits. That bumped the list up to 440 projects. Staff did reduce that down to 159, so just removing duplicated addresses if there's multiple building permits for one address. Also removing some of those use and occupancy permits would just be for a new tenant entering a space, as well as having some interior modifications, whether that be for commercial properties with either interior partition walls or items that wouldn't necessarily affect the historical fabric of a structure. So that was reduced down from that 440 projects to 159. And the discussion before the board today is to figure out kind of how we're going to parse out those 159 projects, or perhaps take another approach. So I did want to provide some case studies. So this wasn't necessarily detailed in the staff report. There was a section in the discussion about kind of allowing some flexibility and perhaps having a stewardship award category, or kind of expanding beyond these built projects, if you will. So 2 case studies are the Governor's Historic Preservation Awards. They are roughly grouped into 2 large categories. So that's individuals, organizations, and agencies. So outstanding organizations that sponsor historic preservation or efforts in their respective communities, as well as projects. And those are further reduced down to either restoration or rehabilitation of buildings, or activities of those said, say, resources, whether it be a program on a historic site in the state. So that is how the Governor's Historic Preservation Awards are divided. And I also provided another example of the National Trust in their Historic Preservation Awards. So they each have an individual's name, and it's roughly grouped by preservation, so actual built projects, organizational awards for, similar to how the state program operates, awarding activities of nonprofits or organizations, a stewardship award, as well as a partnership with the federal government for any tenants or properties that are under the federal government. So with that, I can entertain any further questions, and we can pull up that 159 project list and perhaps go through there.
So if possible, I know you presented this as 2 separate items, which I agree with. If the board is open to it, I would love to talk about the text of the section 8, 8.1, and 8.2 and nail that down, and then talk about at greater capacity the awards, what is going to be awarded, what our criteria are, and so forth. Because we do need to get this Article 8 approved before we can do anything else, is my understanding, correct, Stephen?
Correct.
Okay. Whoops, sorry.
I have a question. On this list of 150 some, are there demolitions on there? I mean, it looked like there were, so I'm just curious why.
So I believe you probably have seen some demolition award mentioned in that 159 project list, so that could include perhaps a non-historic structure on a site, perhaps a garage, a replacement, or an accessory structure. I don't believe that the city would want to be awarding a demolition of a historic residence or another structure of that nature, so I believe that's where that came from, but we can search the Excel document and find exactly what you're referencing, because I do
There were a
recall that.
couple, but I'm just going to pull this one because maybe somebody knows. I did not drive by, sorry. But 1201 Bryant Street, it looked like a total demolition on whatever I was looking at on the web. And it says, new 2-story, single-family residence with basement, heat pump, and 400 amp electrical service in Professorville. And that just sounds like a demo to me. And looked like a demo, but I didn't go by.
So if I recall from that project history, so that is within the historic district, but the structure
Professorville.
itself was not historic. So we can look up the records, but that, I believe, was built in, say, like a
I'm
ranch
not
style.
questioning that, I'm just questioning, I mean, are we looking at it being better infill? Would that be like the thought there? The better infill than what was previously there, and that might be worth an award?
Perhaps, that could be up for discussion. It could be a,
I'm just wondering.
Hold on,
There are
let's-
guidelines in Professorville for things like massing, roof lines, all that kind of stuff. And so maybe you would evaluate it to see if it's a good example of following the guidelines.
Okay, let's go back to Article 8, because this is going to get in the weeds real quick. And like, I have gone through the list, I have comments on the list. Yes, like, let's go into the weeds. But let's not go in the weeds if there's no point, which is getting this approved. That's okay. Cart, horse, I'm just like in order today. I'm on one. So my comments on this, my question, the language as it's written, it says in the second, well, it's one sentence. It says, Palo Alto's architectural and cultural heritage and on compliance to the Secretary of the Interior standards. Is there a reason that sounds strange to me, but it may be legalese? Is there a reason that that's not in compliance with the Secretary of the Interior standards?
would the language on the screen better reflect a flow, removing the word on?
And I suggest replacing it with in compliance. And in compliance with, so we'll remove to and replace it with. With the Secretary, yes. And then my other comment proposed would be in section 8.2, instead of saying winning projects, say awarded projects, because it's not really a contest. Those are my only comments. Anybody else have comments on the article as it's written?
Can you just restate what you just said about winning projects?
And if I may, it is listed on the screen, so.
Yeah. So it previously said winning projects, and it's not really a contest. We are awarding notable projects. Thank you. So if there's no further discussion on this item, do we need to vote on this language? Stephen?
Yes, and this can be since it's all under one action item on the agenda, we can have multiple motions, so one for the amendment to the bylaws, and then we can have another one for the discussion of the actual awards itself, so.
Sorry, I do have one question, which is, it says at the end of the first paragraph, may be presented every 5 years, beginning 2025. So is that saying that the awards program happens every 5 years, or okay, so every 5 years, the list is sort of reevaluated, and then this program happens? Okay.
Correct, that was the intent of the language.
So the projects would be up, so we're looking at projects up until the end of 2025, and the projects are be awarded for 2025 in spring of 2026. So whatever, if there's a ceremony or the display in City Hall would be in spring 2026 to be in line with the ARB awards and National Preservation Month, is my understanding.
Correct.
If there are no further questions or comments on this item,
I'll make a motion that we adopt Article 8 as written regarding preservation awards to the ordinance.
I'll second.
Board Member Pease,
Yes.
Board Member Ulinskas,
Yes.
Board Member Eagleson-Cheswich,
Yes.
Vice Chair Willis,
Yes.
Chair Roman,
yes.
motion carries 5-0.
Yay, we did it! Okay, great. Now we can go crazy talking about what should be awarded, what categories, how, why, it is now, the floor is open.
So does Alyssa want to set us up, having organized this a little?
Yeah, so I'll start by saying I have not had a chance to review every property on this list thoroughly at this point, so I would like more time. That said, I know we haven't had a chance to connect about it, but there are I have one question and then a couple of things like suggestions. One question is that I notice on this list, some of the projects don't show as finalized. Should we still treat those as eligible in this cycle? Is the plan for them to be finalized before things are wrapped up for the year?
So that could be a discussion that the board decides. With the Architectural Review Board awards, their language that was adopted in their bylaws was to have a built project. So having a final project was kind of the qualifier, or disqualifier, if you will, for a project to be awarded. So that's up for discussion. I definitely know that some of these items need to be further looked at. I believe that there's at least one or two that have recently changed of that status. So depending on kind of what we're hearing here today, that column can be either removed or updated as we have these discussions. So.
Okay. Because there's definitely one, I know 1023 Forest came before us previously and looks, I think, very promising in my opinion. I don't know if it would be finalized in time. So that is sort of like an open.
So that's a good open question for us is, do projects need to be in some level of completion that we feel before they can be awarded? And I got an update on that project in particular last night, and it is not close to being final.
So it may get to wait for the next cycle.
2030.
Which is fine. But other suggestions I had, is to have residential and commercial categories, and just kind of take a look at those like completely separately. I do like the idea of looking through the list with an eye towards a smaller project that can be acknowledged. But I also do like the fact that we've left the categories intentionally flexible. So if we see something on here that, I think that is outstanding in a way that's not like predefined, that shouldn't be a reason not to acknowledge it.
So I did have a chance to go through, actually, this is an interesting question. So I had a chance to go through the Excel version of this document, and I organized it by street name, so there was just a little bit more of rhyme or reason. And I've gotten through about half the list, and I'm happy to, I don't know that I can share that because it's a Google Doc, and I don't want to, if there's collaboration in the doc, then we're starting a daisy chain inadvertently, which is not the purpose.
To avoid any violations of the Brown Act, feel free to send that over to staff and I can distribute that.
Okay.
And we can have that.
Okay, so some of the things that a lot of what was coming up in the properties that I reviewed was additions, ADUs. I think that's an interesting and open item for discussion. I don't know that I have a strong, well, my inclination is to not award, I'm hoping that we have more compelling things to award than somebody adding an ADU to their house, put it that way. I think there's also something to be said for people who are doing seismic retrofits, new roofs, and because those are major projects that are with prolonging the life of the structure. Credit actually to Lee Lippert, who pointed out that both Lucy Stern and I think Gunn High School have recently put on new roofs. So those structures are being prolonged because of that. I'm not sure that I saw those in here. I didn't look at the address specifically, but that is something that I think when I looked at this list, I wasn't originally looking out for, and then did a control F for roof or seismic or that type of thing. And there are a lot of projects that may not be a total restoration or renovation, but are prolonging the livelihood of the home.
Yeah, I think sensitive window replacement, can also fall into that category. And I agree that ADUs, like if we look at ADUs, it should kind of be its own thing. And, maybe there is an ADU that's done really sensitively.
I think they are going to happen, and I think it doesn't hurt to hold up a good example of one that's done well.
I love that. I mean, that's a whole separate category, which I defer to the subcommittee on. That's like in that level of weeds that I'm like, sure, if you want to look at all the ADUs that were done in the last 10 years, God bless you.
One thing I wanted to mention is I was looking at additions. There are a number of projects that are two-story additions, and I drove by these properties, and I think I know what the two-story portion is that was added, but I'm not 100% sure. So I could go to the records department and I could search the address and the permit history and everything like that. Or is there an easier way that possibly we could understand what the scope of the addition was on these addition properties?
Sure. So let's see here. Two things. One about permit request. Definitely the Palo Alto Building Eye is a great tool to research some planning entitlements and to look at those plan sets, if you will. As for building permits, that it is a little bit more of a different conversation. But as we progress in the discussion here, reducing the list down, staff would be comfortable, providing some further clarification on what was actually done to some of these properties. That could look as, in the form of sharing, portions of a building plan set of, where the addition would be located, what exactly structural things might have been done on the structure to accommodate that. So that could be distributed.
I mean, there was one on the list, which is 251 Lincoln, and it said it was a major resource. And when I look at it, it looks like there's a very distinct yet complementary addition onto the side of this Craftsman. But again, that's my theory, so I'd love to confirm that.
And if I may, just to kind of follow up on that, if there's any questions about these properties that the board may have, feel free to, send correspondence to me, and I can look into things further and provide clarification on exactly what was done. I know that the majority of these items on the list were before my time with the city, so I think we're in this together, if you will, on looking at kind of what the previous past 10 years that was completed. And as we move forward, we can, develop a robust award program and kind of flesh out what that process looks like.
I also do want to mention there was another one on this list that I'm just familiar with from like walking around that involved the removal of a very historically inappropriate addition, which was a great, example of a restoration. But, it really does, I think, require looking at, Google Maps and Google Maps like with the history feature on or walking by, because like from the description, like if I hadn't been kind of familiar with the project already, I wouldn't have known like, oh yeah, that was like, a mid-century modern sunroom stuck onto like a 1900s colonial, or like 1920s colonial or whatever. Yeah, it was, yeah.
So I'm just wondering if we can define our roles a little better, because I'm looking at this 156. That looks like a lot for you two to go through. Are you up for that task, or you want to delegate some?
I'm open to delegating certain categories.
Yeah, I am as well. I mean, if there are particular categories that, folks want to be kind of on the lookout for, I think that.
Sorry, I was more thinking about narrowing down the list. I mean, that seems like the big task, right? Going through the whole list and figuring out what is a possibility. What are our possibilities?
If I may, so as we kind of went through with the Architectural Review Board, that is exactly, as Board Member Willis noted, kind of how the list was divided. So if we were looking at that 159, that would be roughly 30 to 31 projects per board member.
Mm-hmm. So do we want to just like assign pages? It's like you get page 1 and 2, you get, I mean.
I want Samantha to do it by street names first, don't you think? But if this same list was just in order by street number, street name, wouldn't that be easier to, we wouldn't then all be driving all over the place.
Well, and what? My question is, to Alyssa's point, what are we looking for as we review this list? Are we looking for things that are like obviously should be taken off the list? And the reason I ask is because I have gone through probably 70% of the list, and I have a recommendation on which ones I do not think would be eligible for the award. So I've already gotten the list down to a place where I can go through myself and say, oh, this one would be good for this one would be good for this. But again, we don't have categories. I am just looking at this list as like, well, I don't think that's a good example. Somebody else may think differently, and if we don't all go through the list, then things are going to be missed. For example, the addition of ADUs, not something that, as I look at this list, I personally was going to call out as something that was going to be awarded. But board member Lucinkus, sorry, I can't say it, made a great point that maybe that's a whole other category, which I didn't think of. So, thoughts on that?
I think it would be a good category, yes.
Thoughts rather on how if we split these up, are then, let's say I take 30, am I only looking at those 30 and because again, I'm gonna look at those 30 and say, ADUs, nope, take them out of here. It's gonna be piecemeal, and people are gonna be using different criteria to go through their part of the list than I would go through my part of the list, and it's going to be a jumble and completely disjointed.
If I may offer a suggestion, I definitely think probably a little bit more manageable project list to go through is splitting up that 159 projects. As for how or what lens we're looking at those 30 some odd projects per board member, selecting or kind of having some categories would be a great lens to look through these through. So perhaps for the discussion, maybe narrowing down some of those categories would be fruitful. And what I've heard so far, my little running list here would be commercial, residential, perhaps under residential, having a ADU award category, and offering those case studies up again of having, we are talking about the project list itself, but there are a number of organizations in the community as well that could be potentially awarded with this, so.
I mean, I think residential should have exterior rehabilitation, which Forest Avenue is, we all agree, like a slam dunk for if it were eligible. Addition and expansion, ADU addition or conversion, and dare I say it, new build. New build. Because again, new houses are going to be built in historic neighborhoods, and I don't think it hurts for the board to hold up what we think is a good example.
Okay, so that would get us to, for residential.
Well, I want to go a little deeper with Geddes here. So are you thinking about in historic districts so that they would be complementary to the historic district? Are you thinking about, unfortunately I picked the wrong property when I was looking at that demo, but there is one on Hawthorne that it could be in Professorville too, but I don't think it is. There's one on Martin, which I know is not in a district. So I'm just wondering, are you looking at the rebuilds in terms
Actually,
of district?
not just historic districts, just anything that was on this list that is a new build, that is sensitive in terms of its massing and scale, would be great.
I understand how that's relevant to preservation.
Because it preserves the scale of the neighborhood. Because there's so many properties being built right now to the gills by certain builders, and when you see a nice house that is scaled to match like the prevailing massing on the street rather than maxing out, I don't think that's a bad thing to recognize.
I don't either, but I think it's ARB, not HRB.
True.
Okay.
So let's say we want to do 5 categories for residential. I think having 5 or 3, so I think that's a very interesting idea, because we all do see the black and white lot busters that are monstrosities. So there are some new builds that are nice. My question to the board would be, if we're only going to choose 3 or 5 categories for residential, is that one of the 3 or 5? We need to prioritize. And my first 4, I guess, not even, my top 2 that I would recommend would be preservation and rehabilitation. And the other 1 or 3, I would love to hear suggestions on. My outstanding question that I think we have kind of run around in the past is, are we only awarding projects that have come through city permitting? And I will say that, yes, I would love to do a stewardship project. Yes, I would love to award individuals or organizations. There is another award program that happens yearly in Palo Alto that also takes a lot of that and does that very nicely. And these 2 programs are not going to be conjoined. I would say I lean towards projects that have been permitted.
I would suggest that we go through a modified list and look at the categories, the things, what we actually have that's strong over the last 10 years, because I don't know, what we're going to find. It wasn't totally clear to me looking through. I know the Forest House, if it was done, we'd all be on board, but it's not. So I think yes, I think that rehab and preservation are two great categories, but I also think we need to look at what we got and be true to our mission.
I do think that categories are, flexible by design. We can choose to not award in a category. We can choose multiple awards in a category if the situation calls for it. I think the categories, we should think about them as kind of a lens through which to evaluate the list. And come up with some suggestions for what might fit. But I also think it shouldn't stop us if somebody is looking at the list and says, I'm seeing something great here and it doesn't neatly fit into one of these, still bring it up for discussion, because I think that, we have left ourselves some flexibility there. I also do agree, I'd rather just look at permitted projects rather than, kind of a stewardship award, because I do think that duplicates work from another organization.
This is kind of along those lines, but I think, I know Sam and I brought this up originally with awards, but I really think that awarding some of the people who have really been fundamental and foundational for our preservation program, this first set of awards would be a really good time to do that.
And if I may, so in previous years for the Architecture Review Board, there has been, say, like a board's choice or honorable mention for some projects that might not necessarily fit neatly into some of these award categories. So that might be something that the Historic Resources Board considers, of having maybe a board's choice or an honorable mention for a project. And I've put on just what I've heard in discussion here on the screen. Happy to keep this a running list and kind of flesh that out.
Can you add preservation and rehabilitation under both?
Yes.
Thank you. So going back to this list of 150 or so that are from the past 10 years and how we want to approach going through it. If we are not going to, we can look at it through a lens of some of these award categories, knowing that we may not find a great option. We may not find a great rehabilitation project in this list of 150. But at least if we're looking for it, we can be like, no, really, there wasn't one. So maybe if we can get to a agreed upon list for residential and commercial, that will help us digest this list.
Residential and commercial seem pretty straightforward, and the categories of preservation and rehabilitation seem right for that. But I know this is probably not architecturally correct, but to me, something like an addition, an ADU, or exterior modification all could fit under one thing. Now, I don't know how you do something about small projects versus large projects here. And the small projects one was to me, the most interesting thing, because I think it broadens the category. It makes it more accessible to other property owners.
And if I may, just to perhaps expand on that, what Board Member Peace had said, of kind of where these exterior modifications, additions, or ADUs could land. If we look at, say, the Secretary of Interior Standards, the 4 treatments, if you will, for historic properties. So you have the preservation, the rehabilitation, restoration, and then reconstruction. So those are those 4 treatments for historic properties. So if we're thinking about, projects falling under rehabilitation, that offers the most latitude for these additions or modifications. Preservation is really that maintenance of the structure. Restoration, perhaps would be removing a non-historic addition, restoring the structure back to its previous state. And then, of course, reconstruction, which we don't often see here in Palo Alto, is reconstructing a removed feature, which we had on the 1023 forest property of the reconstruction or restoration, if you will, of that Belvedere, that tower element. So aside from that, we might be a little hard pressed in the list to find maybe that category for this past 10 years.
Let's add restoration on both, because this is just a brainstorm right now. We're just looking at lenses that we could put on top of this list. Commercial, can we please add adaptive reuse? Because there is a specific project that I think would be a slam dunk for that one, and it's the Palo Alto Museum. Could probably go in restoration as well, or rehabilitation. I'm not sure which one that fits best in. It's a lot. So it's because it was originally a doctor's office being turned into a museum, which says adaptive reuse to me, but we want to give that one something, I'm sure. We can figure out which category.
To keep the momentum going, if I remove the top 3 from the list here, do you think that could be captured by the following 3 below?
Why don't you take them and stick them under rehabilitation?
So something was said earlier about specific smaller projects like window replacements or re-roofing or something like that. And Christian also mentioned, smaller projects being something that should be looked at.
Well, for instance, I think we'll need to define small projects. As I was looking at the list last night, there was a permit for repainting, I think a category 2. And I was like, that's amazing, that's great. Like, I don't even know they needed a permit for that, but like, I am so happy that they are taking care of the outside of their house, because there are so many houses that need their stucco replaced and need to be repainted. And I'm like, that is great. Thank you for repainting your historic home. So I don't know if that's under small projects, under reservation, like we're going to start splitting hairs, but I think there's some good work being done.
And I think we should, coming with, if you're reviewing the list and saying like, hey, I think this could fit here or here, that's nice flexibility to have. Other small projects, I saw one on here that ended up not being exactly what I was looking for, but it talked about replacing a gate. It was like that, depending upon how that's done and the specifics of the situation, like that actually could be really impactful. Or when I think about the project on Cowper we looked at recently with the large wall around it, if that project was like demolition of the, inappropriate wall only, like, that's I guess the sort of thing I was envisioning for, where the repaint I think is a great example, but to acknowledge like these small things that make a big difference.
No, I think that's great, because it sort of acknowledges that not just very large, expensive projects need to pay attention to historic, context. Even just very small upgrades, if you think about it in historic context, I think that's wonderful.
I'm just wondering, how do you discern between a job for preservation and one which is, does it depend on how it's painted, or just that it's been painted? Does it go back to a period? Does it do something in that regard? Just curious.
I think that's also open for discussion. I think that's a great point. And again, we are looking at categories with which to narrow down this list. And my suggestion, and I am willing to take it on, and I would be interested to hear what the subcommittee is interested in taking on. I will look at every project on this list and try to pick out 1 or 2 for preservation, 1 for rehabilitation, or, and assign some categories and come back with a list. That is something that I am willing to commit to for the December meeting. And then we can have a discussion and see if there are some consistencies, or, have a project off where we look at both projects and decide which one is a better example. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think when we've narrowed down the list and we all come with our suggestions, we can get like pretty into the weeds with the specifics, like, okay, this project got repainted. Now how do we feel about the, kind of historic sensitivity of that repaint? Because yeah, from the list, we can't necessarily tell, but we'd have the opportunity to all chat about it.
Once these categories are established for the first time around, how hard would it be to modify them?
Per our newly enacted bylaws, it's up to us. Every year, every 5 years, we get to decide what our categories are.
Would it make any sense to start with a simpler set of categories and do this once and then talk about it afterwards, what the result is, what that process yielded?
Can you expand on what you mean by a simpler set of categories?
Well, I guess that's what I was getting to when I lumped things in as an addition, for example. That could cover being compatible, an ADU that fits with something, and something that's attached to the historic structure that fits with it. Just some way of putting them into fewer categories, and then going through this, making the award, and it seems to me there's going to be a lot of institutional knowledge established in that regard.
I think it's a great suggestion, and to that point, I would be comfortable if we agreed to look at this list of 150 some, residential in one category, commercial in another category, and under each one, we use the Secretary of the Interior standards definition for preservation, rehabilitation, and restoration, and then in commercial, we add adaptive reuse. So we're going by the Secretary of the Interior standards, which are very clear and we can map to for this first one. And then it's open to discussion, but that's what we're looking towards as our true north. And we're doing, those 3 categories, or maybe 4, including small projects for residential, and then 4 for commercial that includes adaptive reuse. That would, in the effort to simplify and to have a true north that has been established by a body greater than ours, that would be my suggestion.
And it just seems to me we could have a catch-all category. So as we go through whatever number these are, you become an advocate for a small project or this project or that project. You can make a case for it, and it's not a people's choice type category, but the idea of people on the board advocating for certain projects around certain criteria that don't necessarily fit those other broader, easier to define groups.
Absolutely.
So
But I
I wanted
wouldn't
to
call it an
mention,
honorable mention. I think it should be an equal,
okay.
if you will. Honorable mention was for coming in, not getting first, second, or third, but
Okay. So
or a participation award.
for this board choice award, just as you were fascinated by the repainting permit, I was equally obsessed with 221 Kingsley, which the description says the house was, well, it appears to be a beautiful historic shingle-style house that was picked up, rotated, and moved on the site. And I'm guessing that was done because the house was in the middle of the site, and it eventually ended up having a pool and a pool house in the back. So I think they picked it up and moved it to create a big enough yard to create all those things. And to me, people would normally show up and be like, oh, well, this has no backyard and we want a pool house, let's knock it down. The idea of actually picking up that house and moving it and resiting it so that you could develop what you needed, I don't know if that fits a specific category, but to me, something like that is something that intrigues me.
I think it's a really good project to talk about. I think going by and looking at it is important. Right now, it totally blends with the other houses on the Ramona Street block, And whereas before, it was set way back on Kingsley, is that where it is? What's the address on Kingsley?
Yes, 221 Kingsley.
It was set way back on Kingsley, and it had a totally different presence. It was, like the gateway to Professorville. It was a very prominent house, had a huge front yard. The backyard had been separated out over the years, like my house, sell it off a little here, a little there, lose your land, which is what happened before the tax situation changed. But to me, it's a very different house by relocating it than it was originally. And I think it will gain historic merit in its own right, but I think that I think a lot of it was lost when it was moved. It's an interesting project to look at.
Yeah, can I just I do want to point out with that project, I remember this from a while ago. This project is 10 years old, and I think it did receive a past award. I know that we're looking at projects from a 10-year span, but I guess I just want to flag the fact that this isn't particularly current, and while we're allowing things that go back that far, it's pretty far back and has already received an award, so.
And I think the goal for today is we got the Article 8, we're doing an award, amazing. We need to pick the categories with which to view the list so that we can come back in December and have these candid discussions about what is worth awarding and what is not. And whether it's too old and it happened 10 years ago and we don't want to prioritize those projects. So my next step would be to ask the board if we agree with these categories on the screen, and we can commit to coming back in December as led by the subcommittee for the awards to discuss some properties that we would like to award in May of 2026.
And if I may just chime in here, so currently there's 9 lenses, if you will, on the screen of these potential categories that the list of 30 some odd projects per board member could be viewed through. If we're thinking about next steps, following this meeting, staff will divide that list up in a logical manner so that each board member would have either a region of the city or closely located to one another of these projects, and view that list of 30-some projects through these 9 categories to see if there's maybe there's 5 on your list. Maybe it's a residential district and there's no commercial properties in that. So those 4 items would not be, you want to have necessarily a rehabilitation project for a commercial structure just because of the nature of how the list was divided. So ideally, once we come back for that December meeting, the list of 30 would be reduced. To what degree is, at the discretion of each board member. And I think that having that iterative process and that discussion in December would help to further narrow down the list.
Would you be assigning the lists or, okay.
Yes.
And if we have a conflict of interest, we should just let you know with a particular property, let you know?
I believe that I can, yes.
Okay.
I'll be looking at the conflict of interest maps of the residences of some of the board members that live in the area and trying to assign projects that wouldn't necessarily align with that. So.
Sounds good, thanks.
And I think now that we have categories to track to, with which to view our 30 or 50, I think it's 30, because the list's only 156, 30 properties or 31 properties each, I feel more comfortable splitting up the list in that way. I am going to take a look at the whole list at any rate, but. Are we comfortable with that?
So to maybe solidify that direction, a motion could potentially look as to continue this discussion to that December meeting, a date certain, and as we've discussed, kind of detailing some of these categories and dividing that list up. So.
Before we do that, is there any public comment?
To the chair, I received.
And there's nothing on Zoom.
No, nothing.
Okay.
No.
I wanted to make sure that I gave that opportunity.
I wanted to ask, have we decided to keep permit issued on the list for now?
I think so, because some of them are done, like that show up as permit issued here, so.
All right, so we are going to
Yeah.
include permit issued on
Yeah.
this list.
Yes, and that can be updated when the shorter list, if you will, of those 30 to 31 projects are sent out to each board member. I'll make sure to double check each of those projects to see where they're at in their permit process.
And my ask to staff would be, if there is some way to group these, like somebody gets all of Professorville and somebody gets all of Ramona District, or just by street, or some way to digest the list to make it more palatable, that would be appreciated.
One more question. The categories where status is white, it's not final or permit issued, is that, they haven't even gotten to permit yet?
So those were part of the initial 54 projects, so those are the planning entitlements. So staff pulled from Acela the projects that were planning entitlement, and that's a different program. So some of those statuses and things weren't necessarily transferred over with that data. So that's kind of the difference of that. I think on the first page, we're looking at that 1023 Forest Avenue. So, that received the board's recommendation. So effectively, that planning entitlement would be closed out, but it's not necessarily reflected in that status column for what normally would be finalized or permit issued for a building permit. So to add some clarity, I can definitely add that for those 54 projects that were planning entitlements, just to have consistency across the board. But if we kind of recall some of these previous, more recent projects, that the board tends to make a recommendation and closes out those planning entitlements as it comes before them. So.
Okay, then I motion to direct city staff to split up the list of projects from the last 10 years as presented and assign them to individual board members who will then evaluate based on the list of criteria that was previously on the screen, and we will return in December to discuss.
I'll second that.
Board Member Ulenskis,
Yes.
Board Member Pease,
Yes.
Board Member Eagleson Cheswich,
Yes.
Vice Chair Willis,
Yes.
Chair Roman,
Yes.
motion carries 5-0.
All right, we'll move on to approval of minutes.
Okay, Stephen, give us more than a week to look at our properties, though.
Yes.
Are there any changes or comments to the minutes from September 11th?
I move we approve the draft minutes from September 11th, 2025 as written.
I'll second.
Board Member Pease,
Yes.
Board Member Ulenskis,
Yes.
Board Member Eagleson Cheswich,
Yes.
Vice Chair Willis,
Yes.
Chair Roman,
Yes,
motion carries 5-0.
and we'll move on to, there's actually two sets of minutes. The minutes from October 9th, 2025. Are there any changes or notes to those minutes?
And then I did want to note that Board Member Pease was absent. So if you did review the meeting, you could vote on these, but if not, you would have to abstain.
I will abstain.
Okay. And you can abstain when I do the roll call, but I will need a motion and a seconder.
I have
Oh,
a correction.
Okay.
On page 2, so packet page 30, the third paragraph down, second line from the bottom, where it says the request to upgrade the local inventory reclassification. I think that was a fantasy of whoever was writing the minutes. I like it, but they're downgrading. It's not a request to upgrade. It's a request to downgrade the local inventory classification.
We'll review the meeting minutes, but I do recall it would be a downgrade. That was the request of the applicant, not an upgrade. So thank you. Packet page 30, noted for the record.
Well, I think we should correct these minutes. I mean, do we do anything with our corrected minutes? But if they're going in a file somewhere, they should be corrected, because I think that's particularly deceptive.
Yes, so a little bit about process here. So following each approval of meeting minutes, those are added to the corresponding meeting on the website. And if there are any corrections that are voted by the board, say as amended, those are reflected in those meeting minutes that are uploaded.
So when council sees the minutes from our meeting, they will see that the request was to downgrade.
Correct.
Okay, I motion to approve the minutes from October 9th, 2025? October 9th? Yes, October 9th.
As amended.
As amended, thank you.
No, second that.
all right. Board Member Yelinskas?
Yes.
Board Member Pease? Yeah. Yep. Board Member Eagleson-Cheswich?
Yes.
Vice Chair Willis?
Yes,
Chair Roman?
Yes.
Motion carries 401 with Board Member Pease abstaining.
I just have a comment on that. It seemed to me there was a lot of opined used here, which I'm okay with once or twice, but it seems like there was quite a lot of it. So if maybe whoever is transcribing could find a little word in there, an alternative word in their dictionary.
Any other board announcements or community announcements?
Just on our upgraded inventory list. There's obviously a lot to go through, and Samantha and I were fantasizing about everything we'd like to have related to a specific property on a little chart. But I think what we're coming around to is that we're going to, have like maybe 5 topics at the head of our column for starters. Date constructed, and whether it's in Professorville, and, the major things. And then as we get through our upgraded inventory, then we can expand this list to include other things, like the architect and the builder and things we'd like to have sort of right at our fingertips, but aren't there right now. So we're trying to get practical on our upgrade, our inventory upgrade, and we're getting close.
Just a thought, Stephen, can you send the copy of that slide that you created with the categories when you send out the list of 30 projects to each person?
Yes.
Thank you. Any further comments? All right, I will adjourn the meeting. Thank you.